Now we come to quite an astonishing source, primary source, which is the Laudatio Turiae, which in Latin means in praise of Turia. This was a first century BC tombstone with a eulogy from a man. We're not sure who he was, what his name was, but certainly it's clear that he was an upper class Roman male, to his wife, who's believed to be a woman called Turia, although she is not mentioned in the inscription itself. But scholars have done a bit of research based on the political goings on at the time. And in the source, we see that this man is uh, it has been exiled during the civil wars, and so scholars have come up with some theories as to who it might have been. We can see here that it was a quite a substantial tombstone. In fact, it's the biggest one with most lines of writing in the Roman world that we've found so far. And it gives us an amazing insight into an actual married couple of Rome, and during the first century BC, and actually what's quite a unique kind of relationship, and quite a personal insight into the relationship between a Roman man and a woman, and perhaps throw some of the normal ideas that we have about married life in Rome up on its head. So the first thing we notice, so this is set in the background of the fact that Turia's husband was involved in the kind of goings on of the turbulent times of the civil wars, and and there was lots of political manoeuvrings at this time. And here we can see that actually he's in exile. And so the first part of the tombstone, he describes how loyal she was and what an ideal wife she was as she tried to protect him and to secure his release from exile and to support him while he was in exile. So you provided for me in my flight and sold off all the gold and pearls on your body. You sent it to me, and frequently too, you sent servants money and provisions. And this was obviously dangerous because she was deceived our enemies' guards. So there were guards who were kind of keeping an eye out for these sorts of things, and she managed to obviously get around the guards and to get the supplies to him. And also, she was willing to demonstrate self-sacrifice by selling off gold and pearls that she had. So, an ideal woman or wife in that respect. Um, we also see her loyalty depicted here when he talks about, you know, Turia standing up for her husband, putting herself out on the line as a woman as well. You begged for my life, and he recognizes how courageous this is, as your courage urged you to do. And because of your entreaties or because of your pleas, I was protected by the clemency of those against whom you marshalled your words. So he was protected by those who she uh, pleaded with, and he puts that down to her strength of mind and her speaking skills. As well as that, she's also defends their house. A man called Milo at the time uh, was trying uh, to take the house from them, um, taking the opportunity provided by the civil wars. And so during this turbulent time, he was able to potentially get away with it, and had sent essentially thugs to go and ensure that happened. Um, and this led to quite a dangerous situation for Turia. And this next paragraph, 11, um, shows how awfully treated she was, even as a noble upper class Roman woman. Um, she was yanked up, dragged off, snatched away. Her body was covered in bruises. She would have been beaten, um, and uh, received awful treatment, all because she was trying to protect her house, um, and support her husband. Um, he identifies Marcus Lepidus as the man responsible this. Um, and um, and he mentions him a couple of times. Um, Amazingly, Tyrion manages to get Caesar um, to to support to support him and actually reinstate him from exile. So her words and her actions do have an impact, and essentially manages to save her husband's life. Um, the topic then changes to children, and we have quite an amazing account here where we find out that Turia was willing because she was so she'd been trying to have children for many years, and had tried many ways of having children. However, um, uh, she's unable to, and then she's now at a point where the advancing of her years has put an end to that hope. Um, and he's um, and when she realizes that, she actually um, proposes to him that they divorce and that he marry another and have children with another. Um, so not only that, um, not only being given over to the fertility of another woman, which she would personally seek out and provide a match with him, but she also then says that she would consider the children shared, and that she would make no separation of our inheritance. So the money that she has, she'd be willing to pass on to his children, and also that she would then act like act with the duties and devotion of a sister and a mother-in-law towards her ex-husband if that were to have happened. So it's quite amazing. I think what it reminds us is that um, it, the pressures that women felt to have children, um, the fact that she knew that was her role, was to provide children, and because she hasn't been able to, she proposes a practical plan. But what is quite amazing about this is how hurt and shocked he is. You know, for him, it's not about the children. For him, he's just so devastated and horrified. I was so incensed. I took leave of my senses. He could scarcely compose himself. The fact that she would propose a separation between them, um, and cease to be his wife is just so heartbreaking for him. And so he refused her, and so they continued married and until she died, and they were childless. But that to him seems to be enough. So it's a real story of what we call kind of romantic love here. Um, they were married for 41 years, which is quite amazing, given the time, given during the Roman period, where death rates were high and life expectancies were shorter than ours are now. So pretty amazing long marriage even by modern standards. I think this line here is really interesting too. Long-lasting marriages like ours are rare; those that are ended by death, not divorce. So, implication here from the writer of the eulogy that actually divorce was very common at the time, and hence why Augustus brings in the Julian Laws, which we're going to discuss next. Paragraph 30. Then he starts to praise, the typical kind of ideal Roman woman qualities, um, being good domestically, loyalty, companionship, will working, being religious, moderation, admirable dress sense, kindness, looking after your family. It's all the things that we'd expect of a good matrona. Um, so, um, yeah. So an amazing source really from the Roman world that gives us really, really intimate and personal insight into a Roman marriage. In contrast, we then have some excerpts from some of the Julian marriage laws, and these are quite amazing. Obviously, created by um, or instituted by Emperor Augustus in 18 BC as a reaction to what he saw happening in Rome at the time. The destruction of what he believed were the good kind of old-fashioned morals, um, high divorce rates, lots of um, lots of remarrying going on, and what he saw as kind of the moral decay, and he wanted to bring Rome under his control as the emperor, the first emperor. He wanted to bring Rome into a time where um, they look back at the olden, the customs of their ancestors, the mos maiorum, and part of this is valuing marriage and loyalty and commitment, and trying to prevent, and also from a practical point of view, trying to prevent um, disputes over inheritance. So we have a variety of his laws, many of them aimed at men. For example, 120, men must marry. Um, so in order, and this line here, in order to produce children. So very clearly the main purpose of marriage is to produce children. Um, there are also incentives for marriage and having children, as well as penalties. So heavier taxes on men who are unmarried and also women without husbands. Even those women who might have been widowed, there was an incentive to try and get them remarried as soon as they could. And awards for marriage and childbearing. So, taxes being uh, not as heavy, and other rewards for the women. Um, some other things to note in these. This one's quite interesting. 122. We get the mentioned here that people were actually trying to get around the laws. So men was done to get engaged to very young girls, and it meant that they could feel that they could continue having affairs or sleeping with prostitutes, etc., whilst they waited for the young girl to come of age, really. And frequent divorces as well. So um, Augustus put a time limit on engagements. You could only be engaged for a certain period of time, and then you'd have to get married, and also really clamp down on divorce. The consequences of adultery laws are interesting. Particularly, it's interesting to note that the first few clauses are to do with the father's rights, all to do with men um, having rights to do certain things if their wives are found to be adulterous, um, or sorry, their daughters are found to be adulterous. So the first few clauses to do with the father permitted to kill an adulterer, so his daughter's lover, and also potentially kill his daughter, clause 2. Um, and then from 4 onwards, we've got the husband's rights and what they could do. I think uh, 6 is very important. Is very interesting. The fact that there's an obligation for it was it was all about public declaration. Once they've found the adulterer, if he killed the adulterer, then the husband must dismiss his wife at once and publicly um, declare the adultery and the specifics of it as well, which is quite amazing. Um, and then Another one that's quite interesting is here, actually, there's protection against males being raped. Anyone who has sexual relations with a free male without his consent shall be punished with death. Notice that this doesn't apply to slaves. The other one is incest, penalties for incest, which includes kind of exile as well. And lastly, 17, in a case of adultery, a postponement cannot be granted. So divorce was immediate and quick after adultery. It was no nonsense. And Augustus, through the kind of severity of some of these laws, was making clear his views on the importance of marriage and the purpose of marriage, which was to produce children.